Mr. Farenthold.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Inspector General, I apologize if I sound terse or hostile. I'm a huge fan of the Inspector General program. I think it's a great asset. But there do remain some questions that I've gotten in my office about, is this investigation just the fox guarding the hen house? I think your report does go into great depth, but I do want to hit the outlines of it and some things that may lead to where we need to go further in this committee in continuing to investigate fast and furious. So my first question is, the Supreme Court has made very clear with respect to executive privilege, there's not an unqualified presidential privilege. The deliberative process privilege requires that the protected material be both limited to communications occurring before the policy adoption and deliberately reflecting the process by which the policy alternatives are assessed at the highest level. As you know, the President has claimed executive privilege to a broad group of documents this committee has subpoenaed, some of which I imagine that you looked at in your investigation. You've had access to thousands more documents than we have. My first question is, roughly how many of these documents, in your opinion, would be covered by executive privilege?
Congressman, we fortunately didn't have to make a decision about what we thought was or was not within executive privilege, because our decision right at the outset was to ask for all the documents that we needed. We got them, and to include them in the report.
Right, but y'all looked at them.
We looked at everything.
Gut feeling, then, if you can't answer specifically, were there some in there covered by executive privilege?
I don't know that. That was never our call. We were never shared with any information about that.
All right. You noted also in your report that the White House refused to share internal communications with you during your investigation of Fast and Furious. We've noted a connection into the White House through Kevin O'Reilly at the National Security Council. Do you think the White House's refusal to share these documents limited the scope of your investigation, and would this committee be well served by pursuing an investigation in that avenue?
Well, as we noted in the report, and as you know, Congressman, we did not get internal communications from the White House, and Mr. O'Reilly's unwillingness to speak to us made it impossible for us to pursue that angle of the case and the question that had been raised.
So it would probably be worthwhile for us to pursue.
Well, certainly we have sought to pursue every lead we could. So I can just tell you from our standpoint, it was a lead we wanted to follow.
Thank you very much. And as Mr. Barton pointed out, I'm sorry, Mr. Burton pointed out, the DOJ has been accused of cooperating with outside groups like Media Matters for advice and spin on stories, so they'll come out in a positive manner. And I imagine the press office and all of the DOJ is concerned about that. It actually kind of troubles me that there is such a political facet to what goes on in the DOJ. Of all the executive agencies, you would hope DOJ would be the one most above politics. But my question is, do you know if the DOJ shared this report prior to its release yesterday with any outside groups, or who within the DOJ that would have made substantive changes to the report?
We provided, for purposes of our comment and review, a draft of the report to the Department. We allowed the Department internally to share it with people who had relevant information, but to tightly control who saw it, and that it was not to be shared outside the Department.
Okay, so to the best of your knowledge, Media Matters didn't vet this?
They should not have, and if they had been allowed to see it, it would have been a violation of the understanding that we had about the review.
All right, great. Now, I've been approached by commentators and constituents alike who question possible political motives behind allowing something like Operation Fast and Furious to continue. You know, some of them have claimed that there may have been a desire at some levels to create a public outcry for stricter gun laws. Would your investigation have been able to uncover political motives behind allowing the operation to continue, and did it, or is the entire fiasco a result of just gross mismanagement?
We did look at that issue and that question to see if we had documents or other evidence on that point. We didn't obviously go into the investigation looking for the motive specifically, but we did think it was important to address it. We do highlight in the report those instances where there's talk about perhaps changing rules, regulations, or laws. What we found is all of those incidents came after the investigation had begun. So the notion was, well, maybe this is a good example to show why we need to change the laws. But we didn't find evidence at the outset that that was what was driving.
Did you find evidence that at any point where the Fast and Furious operation was in effect that this was happening?
There was suggestion later on in the investigation that it might be a good example to show why rules, laws, regulations might be, as an example of why they might need to be changed.
I see my time has expired.
Would the gentleman yield?
Certainly.
So to characterize, they were opportunistic after the fact, but you found no evidence that before the fact that they did Operation Fast and Furious in order to get laws changed.
Correct. In the documents we reviewed, we did not see at the outset. In fact, the documents we saw indicate at the outset the notion was let's not take action to get to the top simply because they wanted to get to the top.
Is Fast and Furious 2,000 weapons being knowingly allowed to walk and leading to the death of Brian Terry, is that a good poster child for why you need to have tighter rules on gun dealers, since gun dealers were in fact ordered or coerced into participating in this rather than listening to them when they say this guy's a straw buyer and arresting him?
Well, we found that in terms of a law enforcement technique or law enforcement tactics, that the decision-making that justified what was going on just failed in the primary mission of law enforcement, which was to protect the public.
I thank the gentleman.